We have to think about it not on a year-to-year basis, because the largest challenges to resilience that we face are what's creeping beneath. It's the slow-moving changes that threaten us in a far more fundamental way in the years to come. We know what they are. We know what's happening in the shift in the global ecological balance. We know what's happening in terms of the aging of societies, which we are by and large not prepared for. We know what's happening in the gradual drift towards polarization. These are the real threats to resilience and to human security. And I'm not even talking about the wars, including the stupid wars that we see. We're going to have to address challenges in the future that are going to have to require more fiscal investments. We're neglecting the issues because it's never pleasant to talk about raising revenues or raising taxes. It's never pleasant to talk about redirecting subsidies or redirecting spending. So we're just merrily gliding into the future, tinkering at the edges. And even the most major international tax reform of recent years, through the G20, was really about something very small to do with corporate taxes and rearranging and reallocating corporate taxes. It's a very small issue compared to the challenges we really face. The big issues are, how do we address the climate transition? How do we address the needs of aging societies and broken social security systems? And how do we address a challenge of an AI era and ensuring that populations can cope with it and benefit from it? It's all going to require the public sector. So if I just take the first, there is no realistic solution to the climate transition that does not involve a globally coordinated system of carbon taxes. There's no realistic or fair solution that does not involve a globally coordinated system of carbon taxes. There's a perception that it's unjust, it's unfair, it'll lead to inflation. In fact, quite the contrary. If we don't do this, the countries that will suffer most ultimately are the developing countries. They're going to be the worst affected by climate change. If we don't do this, it's ordinary vulnerable communities that will suffer the most. What we need is a system of carbon taxes coupled with subsidies for vulnerable households and a stream of funding for the developing world to allow them to engage in investments in mitigation and adaptation that allows them to keep growing. And that's a real opportunity. It's a fair solution, and it's the only realistic solution, and we can't keep ducking it. Second, there's a huge opportunity of redirecting subsidies. The IMF has estimated that about $1.3 trillion is spent each year in fuel subsidies. That's about 5 times more the amount of subsidies that goes into green technologies and green energy. We've got to redirect it. Redirect those fuel subsidies to helping vulnerable households, to helping firms to adjust, and to spurring renewables and other green technologies. The third issue that's maybe the most neglected is preparing for an aging society with confidence. And it means rejigging in significant ways of social security systems and healthcare financing systems. It's not sustainable. Too many people who don't need support are getting support, and too many people who need support the most in healthcare systems are not getting enough support. So there has to be a reshaping of that curve of subsidies within healthcare to benefit those who need it the most. There has to be more spending on preventive or preemptive healthcare spending to help people stay healthy for as long as they can, rather than wait for the very expensive occasions when they have to end up in hospital, particularly for acute care. So we have to get real. The challenges we face are different from the past. We're not going to address them by just tinkering around the edges with rearranging corporate taxes and the like. It requires raising taxes to take on the climate transition. It requires redirecting subsidies to be fair and to ensure that as we age, no one is vulnerable, and we can actually sustain high-quality healthcare systems and social security systems. It requires change.
clearly, the biggest political change that occurred in the United States last year also was unpredictable, or unpredicted, I should say. I don't think anybody outside of the Trump family would have predicted that Donald Trump would be indicted 4 times, 91 counts on various indictments, and that his popularity would soar to the point where he has a reasonably good chance of locking up the Republican nomination by March. So I think people should recognize that he's a serious political force and should not discount the fact that he could well be elected again, despite the fact that many people in Europe, where we are now, are not really his biggest fans.
Well, I think we are talking too much about Donald Trump in Europe, and we should prepare ourselves for a possible second term for Donald Trump by fostering our European competitiveness. Doing our homework is the best preparation for a possible second term of Donald Trump, and this includes our capabilities to defend ourselves, being an attractive partner on eye level when it comes to the economic situation.
Well, I think the US-China relationship is the central axis of tension when you look at the largest problems we face in the world. And it has to be refashioned into the central axis of partnership. They look at each other fundamentally as adversaries, and then they look for opportunities to cooperate within that framework. It has to be flipped around. Fundamentally, they have to be partners because the challenges that they both face are the same. Climate change, a lack of global order, a breaking up of the global trading system. They're challenges that both of them face, and both of them will suffer for it. And the two are absolutely essential to any solution, to climate, to peace, and to an open global trading system. And then within that, you can argue, you can badger, you can ensure fair competition, you can ensure that there's a way of dealing with each other that's consistent with the principles of openness and fair play. But we've got to flip things around where you're not fundamentally adversaries to one where you're fundamentally partners and then you argue about specifics. That's the fundamental repositioning that's required. So it's not just about a pause in the relationship, it's really about a repositioning in the relationship.
The U.S.-China is the most important bilateral relationship in the world. There's no doubt about it. But there is no political benefit in the United States about saying anything beneficial or good about China during a presidential election year. So President Biden and President Trump, I don't think, or either one, are going to say we need to have closer ties with China, and I'm going to be nicer to China than I was before. It's just not going to happen during a presidential election year. Hopefully, after the election's over, the progress that's been made recently at the APEC meeting can see something blossom, but I don't think you'll see anything blossom before then, though hopefully the Chinese will provide some pandas again to the United States, which we desperately would like to have.